record ourselves. I think Christina is here, so why don't we, Christina is a consultant with the comp plan, and she's going to be, yeah, we're going to do it, introductions, welcome and introductions. So I thought it would be helpful if we introduced ourselves and maybe one issue that you're concerned about it with the climate. What's on the top of your sort of list these days?
Wow.
Okay, Linda, you go first.
Oh, thanks. God, it's hard to say what's at the top of my list. Yeah, I have too many things to think about. I think everything we've looked at in our group is of concern, and I think they're all things we have to be aware of and try to make changes in.
Okay,
but I can't hone in on really one at the moment.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, Christina, she likes pollinator gardens and she's been working in. Okay, somebody else, introduce yourself.
This is Anne. I'm vice chair of the committee, and I'm a hydrogeologist by trade. My pressing concern right now is time. We just don't have much of it.
Someone else? Okay, I'm gonna call in the right school. Okay, Jessica. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, but I don't know. What's the question?
What's top of mind for you on the climate issue?
Oh, Jessica Cote. So I'm a coastal engineer and own a small business in Lake Forest Park, based in Lake Forest Park. Well, top of my mind is typically marine shorelines, just because that's where I'm working constantly. And there's a lot of new regulations around how do we talk about things that are flood control versus erosion control structures. It applies to the lake and it applies to rivers and marine shorelines, but our regulatory framework doesn't handle flood control structures very well, except for in big river systems. So more like coastal flooding, or if there was to be small stream flooding, things like that. So I've been having a lot of discussions around that.
Okay, Tamara?
So I'm Tamara Erickson. I'm a developer for a renewable energy company. And something's top of mind for me right now is partnering with Indigenous people and tribes, and how we can make sure that the burden of climate resilience is not they're not being adversely impacted by it.
Matt?
Hi, my name is Matt Sun. I'm a pharmacist by trade at Fred Hutch Cancer Center. I know this is contrary to what Sarah said, but for me, what's really top of mind right now is the situation in Gaza, and if you're not bugging your legislators about, making sure that we're doing everything we can to get a ceasefire, please do. That's feels really urgent. And in addition to climate, but that's just what's been top of mind for me lately.
Tamara, Dana.
Oh. Hi, I'm Dana Campbell. I'm a biologist. I work at the University of Washington on the Bothell campus. And I guess as far as climate goes, one of my top priorities and worries is the environment in Lake Forest Park, especially just making sure that we can keep it from being degraded.
Okay, I'm going.
Okay, go ahead.
Call on me.
I think you're next.
I'm Mimi Bertram. I am an oceanographer by training. Have been working for the program on climate change at UW Seattle for a long time. And today, one thing I was thinking about is that we're all working and talking a lot about climate, but that it's really still a siloed conversation, that there are lots of subgroups of people everywhere who aren't engaged. And so that's the challenge.
Tracy?
Yeah, I'm Tracy Bertani. I teach physics at North Seattle College, and I'm the council liaison to this committee. Top of mind, I wanted to Brian Saunders, who's also a member of this committee, support a little bit. We just submitted, along with Chip Dodd, a 250, I would say 250, no, it's more than that, $400,000 grant application to the Department of Ecology under their free restoration program for restoring Bashella Creek, which is the one that runs around 103rd or so. And one of the things that's notable about that was the significant amount of verbiage we had to put in the climate effects. In other words, how does it help mitigation and or resilience of climate effects? And there were a fair number that we could list. And so I was actually quite proud of that application. So wish us luck.
Yeah.
Ah,
My name's Sarah Phillips. I'm a retired person.
Hardly.
And top of mind for me is this, is something that Mimi touched on. How do we make sure that we're communicating effectively with wide groups of people? Mark, do you want to play with us?
Brian.
Absolutely. Mark Hoffman. I'm the new Community Development Director for the city. Just starting my 3rd month. So a lot going on. But my main issue literally is comprehensive plan update, both for the periodic update due by December, but also the opportunity of the Commerce Grant for the climate element, which would soon follow into 2025, along with development regulations and everything else that's associated with it. So that'll be keeping me up for 2 years.
Perfect. I hear Brian is on, but are you there, Brian?
I'm here.
Okay, we're asking you to introduce yourself and just something that's top of mind on climate. And you're next.
Isn't that the whole? Yeah, no, that's the whole top of line of climate is everything. Well, first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Brian Saunders, and I am a lifetime resident of Lake Forest Park. I'm also an instructor at Shoreline Community College in environmental science biology and North Seattle College. And yeah, I think I just caught the end of Tracy talking about the grant we just submitted. So we're crossing our fingers for that. On top of climate change, I've recently been awarded another grant through the King County to help expand our analysis of Macular and Lion Creek. And we're going to get some college students involved in that. So that's going to be another fun project to look forward to next year.
And who's the fiscal conduit for that? What organization applied for that grant?
Oh, yeah, if you must pry. Yeah, it's the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation, which is a nonprofit environmental group that is present within our community with many members that are both well, they're all fantastic members, I should just say.
Hey, Christina, do you want to introduce yourself now or hold off till it's your time in the agenda?
Oh, I will happily introduce myself now. My name is Christina Hayworth, and I am a senior planner, project manager with SCJ Alliance, which is the firm that Lake Forest Park selected to support the update of its comprehensive plan. I've been working in this realm for a little over 10 years, and I've had a long-standing interest in resilience in particular, and in fact, a lot of the social aspects of resilience and how you can build communities to support really healthy, thriving interpersonal connections that are correlated with a stronger response and recovery effort in the event of a disaster. I did my grad program right when Hurricane Sandy blew up the East Coast, and that was kind of what kicked it off for me. So anyway, I'm really excited to be here talking to you all.
Terrific. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda? Any changes that people want to make? Is there a motion to approve the February 6th minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve February 6 minutes.
Okay, second. Any objection to accepting those? Terrific. Okay. Public comments. David, Nigel?
I'll just introduce myself. I'm David Clevin. I sit on planning.
Terrific. Well, and we're glad you're here. Okay, we're gonna turn it back to you, Christina.
Okay, great. That was a really short, like administrative section of your agenda. All right, let me pull my screen up real fast. Just a moment.
I'm gonna, while you're looking at, did you all get a chance to see the memo that Christina sent out? Okay, terrific.
Okay, yes, we will be, well, before I share. So I do have a presentation that I will walk everyone through. I understand that you got the packet just this week. So I do know that there was a lot of information to digest. Happy to take questions on the memo. I do have some discussion questions that are part of my slides. So if you didn't get to the memo, then we might need to walk through the memo a little bit together before we go through the discussion questions. So just stop me. I won't be able to see you all while I'm sharing my screen. Just stop me.
Christina.
Yeah.
Members of the committee didn't get the memo until today, so I think that maybe not everyone has read.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'll take a pause before discussion questions and we'll go through it together.
Right.
Just to make sure everyone's on the same page. All right. So without further ado, here we are talking about the Lake Forest Park Comprehensive Plan update and integrating the climate action plan into that. We received the January 2024 draft of the climate action plan. So I recognize that it is not a final document, but that is the document that we've been working with to date. Tonight, we will talk a little bit about current planning requirements related to climate change adopted recently by the Washington legislature, our approach to climate planning, which is a two-pronged effort. And then we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing as we're updating the comprehensive plan. And then we'll have some questions and discussion. All right, so the summary of planning requirements. The Washington State legislature adopted recently some amendments to the Growth Management Act that now require local climate action to appear in comprehensive plans. What this looks like is a climate element with two sub-elements. The first is a greenhouse gas emissions reduction sub-element with goals and policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled without increasing emissions elsewhere in the state of Washington. The second piece is a resilience sub-element with goals and policies that are intended to improve climate preparedness, response, and recovery efforts for communities. Because of Lake Forest Park's geographic location in kind of the greater Seattle metro area, King County, it is required to do both of these elements. Other jurisdictions that aren't fully planning under climate are only required to do the resilience sub-element, but Lake Forest Park is on the docket for both of these. Helpfully, the Department of Commerce has published some guidance. It does continue to evolve, although at this point it's fairly firm. They're still calling it their intermediate guidance. So it's something that might get revised as jurisdictions are working through their climate elements. The minimum requirements for the greenhouse gas emissions sub-element are to specifically reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions generated by transportation and land use within the jurisdiction, reduce per capita vehicle miles traveled within the jurisdiction, and to prioritize reductions that benefit overburdened communities to maximize co-benefits of reduced pollution and environmental justice. It's kind of the first place where we see environmental justice appear, but it is something that is foundational to all of the climate planning requirements. And it's something that we really need to be thinking about as we're doing our policy work. The minimum requirements for the climate resilience sub-elements are to address natural hazards created or aggravated by climate change, and the sidebar to the right indicates what specific natural hazards the Department of Commerce is expecting us to look at. Not all of these are necessarily going to be applicable in Lake Forest Park. For example, sea level rise might not be a huge risk for this community, but there are other hazards that are going to be changing and riskier going into the future. So things like landslide, flooding, drought, heat, smoke, wildfire, probably not given the developed nature, although there is quite a lot of tree canopy coverage in Lake Forest Park. So we'll take a look at the data there. They do also leave it open to any other kinds of changes or hazards that an individual community can identify that are specific to local circumstances. The climate resilience sub-element also has to identify, protect, and enhance natural areas to foster climate resilience. That includes identifying vital habitat for species migration. This is another area where there aren't huge migratory corridors in Lake Forest Park that I'm aware of. It is part of the Pacific Flyway, which is the migratory route for birds. But this is another thing that we will want to evaluate as far as land species go. We'll also be looking at salmonid species in the streams. And then finally, to identify, protect, and enhance community resilience to climate impacts, which includes social, economic, and built environment factors. And this is the second place where we start to see environmental justice. There's a sub-requirement to support adaptation to climate impacts that is consistent with environmental justice goals and policies. Before we move on to our approach for this community for climate planning, are there any questions about state requirements? I know this is very high level overview, but any questions thus far?
Christina, can you just tell me what is meant by overburdened communities? Do you have a definition for that?
So overburdened communities are those communities that typically experience greater harms, and most often that is associated with communities of color and lower income communities predominantly. You might also see this referred to as frontline communities. They're the communities that are the most vulnerable.
So it doesn't have to do with the disproportionate impact of something that we would do on community?
So in this case, the goals are to correct historic wrongs. Of course, we want to understand the potential impact of decisions that we're making at a policy level. But the way that the legislation is written is that we're specifically looking at prioritizing decisions that have co-benefits that support these communities that have historically faced so much more risk and so much more disproportionate impact from historic development and decision-making patterns.
Go ahead, just jump in.
So, Christina, thanks for that definition. Is any part of Lake Forest Park fall under that definition?
There are definitely people of color, neighborhoods that are lower income. It's all relative, right? We're going to be looking comparatively within Lake Forest Park. We're not necessarily looking too far beyond city boundaries. We know that this planning isn't happening in a vacuum, but we're primarily concerned with what's going on within the city of Lake Forest Park. And there are some people in the community that would meet this definition.
Thanks.
Oh, and, I can't see everybody, so just
Oh.
jump in when there's a pause.
Thank you. Yeah, to redress historic wrongs, I mean, the city is located on tribal lands. And it was developed with covenant and restrictions. There's a lot of historic wrongs. So I understand we have some neighborhoods, but we may have to look beyond the city to develop partnering relationships if we actually want to redress historic wrongs or mitigate effects on overburdened communities and frontline communities. It's very hard to say we should only look inside our lines if one of the things we did was push everybody outside of our lines. It feels a little smug to say, and now we'll just look inside our lines where we pushed everyone else out. So I just can't let this pass without recognizing the history of Lake Forest Park and where we are. So that will be a part of a bigger discussion. I know it's not a part of our discussion right now, and I know it's not on your agenda or in your mandate for what we're writing, but it lands hard.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Anne. And I don't mean to say that we can't look outside our borders or acknowledge how development has occurred, especially in the greater Seattle area. Everything kind of bleeds together, right? There's just so much travel and so much historic context between all of the different jurisdictions that, of course, like I said, we're not planning in a vacuum, and we recognize that there is a lot of history there, and we can absolutely develop policies around partnerships, and we can develop policies with other jurisdictions, with our neighbors. We can develop partnerships with tribes to do more to redress this. But in terms of what our basic requirements are, and who might be present in the community, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that there are people in Lake Forest Park currently that also are our frontline communities in terms of potential risk in climate planning either. So I think we'll be looking at both, all, as we proceed in the project.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
Okay. All right, so Lake Forest Park's approach to climate planning. We're going to be taking two concurrent paths, and this is a little confusing, so bear with me. I've got a graphic on the next slide that I hope will be a little bit easier to understand. In the original scope of work for the comprehensive plan, we envisioned adapting the climate action plan to address climate, knowing that there were going to be some climate requirements coming. At the time that we developed that scope of work, the Department of Commerce hadn't yet published its climate planning guidance. The legislation was still very fresh. And in fact, Lake Forest Park is not due to adopt its climate element until 2029 because it was already theoretically in the process of updating its comp plan when that legislation was adopted. And the idea that requiring these in-process jurisdictions to play so much catch up, it was just, it wasn't feasible. So Lake Forest Park and the other jurisdictions that are due to update their comp plans in 2024 don't have to adopt their climate element until 2029. However, the city did receive a substantial grant from the Department of Commerce to adopt its climate element early. There was funding left over in the most recent grant cycle, and the city ambitiously decided to go for it, and that grant was awarded. So in addition to kind of the adaptation of the climate action plan that will be done, there will be a concurrent process to develop the climate element. But because of the timing of the comp plan deadline by December 31st, 2024, this year, and the grant funding timeline, which ends June 30th of next year, they're going to be offset a little bit. So we will still be adapting the climate action plan to fit into our current comp plan through all of the work that we're doing right now, with the understanding that climate policies will be integrated into the comp plan that's adopted at the end of this year. And at the same time, we will be following the Department of Commerce's guidance to develop the comp plan's climate element that will be adopted as an amendment to this year's comp plan next year. So what that looks like is this. So we'll be adapting the climate action plan through the early part of this year, basically until the middle of the year. We expect to have a final draft done by the end of June, and that will go to City Council for review in July through December with the rest of the comp plan. So this is pretty simplified schedule. But generally, so working on working on comp plan elements, including adapting climate action plan policies to fit in those elements into this summer, and then following City Council's review and adoption process to meet our 2024 deadline for the comprehensive plan. And starting likely in May, we'll be following the Commerce recommended workflow to develop the climate element, which will extend into 2025 with the expectation that we will have a final document for adoption by the middle of the year to align with that grant deadline. And that will be adopted by the end of the year, along with any other amendments that would be needed in 2025.
Christina,
Yes.
I have a question. Could we-
Yes.
Yeah, could there be a third alternative, and that is that we add a climate action plan, a climate element to the current comp plan, and then revise it with the Commerce grant? And let me just say what my concern is, that we move ahead and the city adopts a comp plan, and there is no climate element in it. There will be the climate action.
So the method that we're proposing is to adopt the climate element. It will be a standalone element, but it would be adopted in 2025. So because that is what aligns with kind of the amount of time that Commerce is envisioning that the development of the climate element will take. And it aligns with the grant structure. Trying to create a climate element now, I think would be, I don't think that you would get the quality of work that the topic deserves. The climate action plan is great, and it has no.
Wait, what?
No, I don't want to disparage the work.
Come on.
I don't want to disparage the work that you've done. At the same time, I do want to acknowledge that it was prepared without following Commerce's guidance, because that didn't exist. And your priorities and Commerce's priorities for the climate element don't necessarily overlap 100%, right? Like there's a pretty decent Venn diagram, but it's not a perfect match. So that's why we're proposing adapting the climate action plan to start incorporating climate policies into all of the elements, not just the minimum required, and then also still follow Commerce's requirements to prepare the full climate element.
Adopted in December?
Yes, no,
No,
well, this December, yes.
That's the one that we.
Yeah, that's one of ours. Okay, just to clarify,
Yeah,
your timeline.
Yes.
The adapt CAP that's at December 2024 is the one that the Climate Action Committee that's developing, right?
Yes, yeah. So this conversation, the memo that I shared, this is kind of step one in adapting the CAP. So we've picked out all of the policies and we've put together where we think they should land in the comp plan. And I think there are a couple that we're recommending deferring to the climate element. But by and large, so that's what we're doing right now. I think, Mark, I don't know, do you want to share a little bit about where we're at in terms of the climate grant and what some of the next steps are and why that's not really getting started until later
I
this
do.
year?
Yeah. The periodic update is now a 10-year update. It's a significant effort. It takes 2 years. Last year, a lot of work was done, including the commerce funding and grant and scope and work plan. And the Planning Commission is tasked with that. What you'll see this spring is 6 added special meetings that support the regular meetings and quite a heavy workload for all the elements in the plan so that we can get this to a public hearing, get all the materials to City Council, and leave as much of summer and the fall for the City Council to do their part. That's a significant workload in itself. Now along comes this new legislation around climate in the middle of that periodic update. So even the legislature acknowledged for King County, for example, it's a very heavy lift to then shift mid-course. So let's make it due in 2029. That's the way the regulations stand. But now with the funding, the opportunity is there, not just for those that are planning under GMA for 2025, the surrounding counties, but there was funding left over for King County cities. We were successful. So the opportunity is we can move that work forward, but in no way does that minimize in any way the periodic update for all the elements. So what we'd like to achieve between now and June is to, at the Planning Commission level, incorporate the climate action plan to the greatest extent we can. Then give that to City Council. That's due December of this year, no matter what. But we would be working on this, on the specific actions and reports and studies for the climate element through the scope deadline of June of next year, and then give the second part of that year to City Council for consideration. There is no convenient overlap that we could squeeze them together. That's the way we have to do it. The opportunity is we get to do it in 2025 instead of 2029.
But here's what I'm confused about. We were gonna do it this year, weren't we? It wasn't our charge to add the climate element to the comprehensive plan?
Your climate action plan is getting incorporated in the comp plan.
The simple answer,
I'm sorry, let me just say this again, because even Corey doesn't understand what I'm saying, so. I think we had understood our mission to develop a climate action plan, and that a piece of that would be a climate element in the current update. So now I think we were moving in that direction and assumed that would happen.
That is what's happening.
No, it's not.
Sarah's right. So with the
Sarah's right.
workflow that I'm presenting right now, the climate element will happen, but it won't happen in the 2024 periodic update. It will happen in parallel for incorporation into the 2024 comp plan in 2025 as an amendment.
So the question I'm asking is, and I'm not asking you, Christina, but I'm asking my colleagues. I mean, I don't mean you shouldn't answer, but does that in any way minimize the importance that we see of this? I mean, that was, as I've been thinking about this, my question has been, if we don't have a separate element, even if it's going to be revised in a year, does that tell a story that we think it's less important?
We will have the climate action plan, which will be ratified by the city as well.
So you think that's not an issue?
It's impossible for the planning department to do this comp element on top of the comp plan right now. So they are going to.
They've got these consultants.
They are taking your guys' climate action plan, and it will be adopted into the comp plan as well as council. So it's just 1 year, couple months after.
Sarah, I don't think it invalidates or minimizes the work of the the Climate Action Committee or everything that's reflected in the Climate Action Plan. That is still going to be present in every single element of the 2024 comp plan. It's something that we've already been talking about with the Planning Commission in all of our working meetings. It's absolutely something that is going to appear in this document. And at the same time, the climate element will have its own process. So it's not like it's going to be lying fallow. It's something that is actively being worked on. And so I don't see it as problematic. And I mean, I know that there's been so much work and so much heart and soul poured into the Climate Action Plan. The Climate Action Plan does not itself meet the requirements that the Department of Commerce has set for climate elements. So we would need to be doing their workflow to hit all of their requirements anyway. And we would need to replace the climate element if we did try to just adopt a new climate element this year. So in this case, we're trying to improve efficiency by incorporating everything that you have done to date into the elements of the comp plan that we already have, while also beginning the process to develop a climate element that meets the commerce requirements.
And if I could just add, if you hadn't done that work, the planning commission wouldn't be having the conversations that we're having now about integrating this into the comp plan.
To give one small,
Go
to give one small example, one of the requirements of the Commerce Department apparently is reducing vehicle miles driven. We don't address that specifically in our plan. And so the point is that this is a great way, as David was saying, of addressing some of the places we didn't go because, you know, we were looking at a much higher level. And so I think it's a great way to work in partnership with the Planning Commission on actually coming up with a much more comprehensive, to use term, way of basically making some of our more lofty goals operational.
Can I follow on that before you?
Please.
Is that, one of the things that I kind of feel is normal process is creating a climate action element, in a comp plan, and then you create your climate action plan. So we've kind of flipped it, and I would suggest we add into our calendar a revision of our climate action plan after the climate element is complete. So we can put that on our calendar.
Not that most cities have a climate action plan around here.
They have climate elements. Kenmore has a climate element.
Yeah, Kenmore does have a,
And their comp plan.
Shoreline
Yeah.
probably does.
Shoreline does.
We didn't realize that. I didn't realize that initially, but we realized that.
Why do
Don't
they
ask-
have
don't
that
go
if
there.
it's
Don't go there.
before it's required? But I
well,
thought,
they knew it was gonna, they knew in 2013, about 2020, a couple of years ago, that there was gonna be a climate element, and they, like Kenmore, for example, hired Cascadia, and they added a climate element to their existing plan. And I think Shoreline has one too, but I haven't been able to check, so,
But I think we can make
Yeah.
the most of this process by
Okay.
adding on a revision to our climate action plan in our plan schedule.
okay,
After the climate element comes up,
using the climate element.
using the climate element to
okay.
add more depth and scope.
So our climate action plan is gonna go into all of the other elements. It
Yes.
doesn't, like, if it's going into all those other elements and gets incorporated there, then it won't be needed for the actual climate element at the end.
I don't necessarily agree with that. We're trying to include policy language that's supportive of the climate action plan, understanding that the CAP is intended to be more of an implementation focused document, whereas the comp plan is more of a goal policy setting document. So what we're trying to do is essentially tee up the CAP to be like the implementation strategy. So it's still going to be useful beyond the life of this comp plan process and also beyond the life of the climate element process, right? It's something that I hope will be useful and revisited for implementation frequently, yearly, as people are making decisions and updating the comp plan over time.
So the grant, does that cover that first part of the calendar there? Or is it just focus on the climate element part afterwards?
The climate grant is just the climate element. There are some other grant funding sources that are contributing to the comp plan, but when we're talking about the grant tonight, we're talking about the climate grant specifically, and it only funds the climate element planning process.
And
So-
Christina, go ahead.
So from my perspective, we have all kinds of planning and writing and workflows. What I don't want held up is the transition. And I think, you know, what I spoke to when I first spoke at this meeting, time is fleeting. I don't want to wait a year to implement change so that we can have a plan telling us we need to implement change. So as all of this climate element commerce workflow proceeds, and we eventually get to an end goal of having a documented climate element and can then improve the climate action plan by conforming the documents, that's all fine. In the meantime, I think what's essential for this committee is to keep doing stuff. Keep teaching people how to swap in hot water heat pumps. Keep teaching people how to use heat pump heating and cooling systems. Transition out of fossil fuel use in our households. Move people to EVs, improve our pedestrian trail and bike trail access through the city. All of those elements should not wait on any plans. We should be having those discussions in all parts of our community and trying to move forward in general. Now that Commerce has guidelines and an element will be written to meet the guidelines, and thank goodness we have some money to pay people to write an element to meet the guidelines, and thank goodness we've done some background work so we can help inform those discussions and the writing of that element so that it actually fits our community very nicely. I don't think we should let the planning process stop us from the implementation process any more than is utterly essential.
I don't know why it would. Your work would continue. You would assist with the other efforts, but your first task is to get the climate action plan approved and adopted and implemented in a budget. So that seems to be the primary work while we're working on periodic update. And now while we're working on the climate element, all of this in the next 2 years. I don't know why those two other efforts would stall or in any way slow down what you're doing with the climate action plan.
Yeah, it just feels a little awkward to have something that was supposed to be, that we thought was going to be accomplished by the end of this year, suddenly be pushed another year out, even if it is a more marvelous version of it. So you've got to appreciate the irony of having a community group working hard to meet a deadline this December that will now be pushed out a year before we meet that deadline. And we're all going to live with it, but it is ironic.
I don't think that's the case. I think
That's what I'm getting at is nothing's being pushed out. You have a contract with Cascadia to finalize this climate action plan, bring it to city council. Nothing in the periodic update, nothing in the climate element interferes with that or pushes that out. That's happening over the next 3 months. Nothing will delay that.
Hey, we have that down on tape. Great, let's go. Okay, you got more, Chris? You got more? Oh, Tracy's got a question.
And Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but no other city has done this the way we're doing it, where there's literally a citizen committee on climate coming up with a climate action plan. Generally, what I found is that city hires a sustainability manager, a climate manager, whatever you call it, and that person shepherds basically the whole process to make the CAP. And then basically things start moving from there. So we're doing it our way. We're doing it our unique way.
I'm not aware of any other community that has it as a resident-led project. Tracy, you're correct that I've only ever seen it being kind of a city consultant-led project that maybe assembles a stakeholder advisory group that's based in the community. But Lake Forest Park is definitely unique in its approach, as far as I'm aware.
Thanks.
Can I just add one small thing? I'm you know, this is the way it's got to be. I'm happy with that. You know, as long as we get the work done. The one thing that Tracy just mentioned, and Christina, you acknowledged the idea that this was done by citizens of Lake Forest Park who know Lake Forest Park. And so I guess one of the things I think we're all afraid of is that the unique parts we put into the climate action plan, based on the fact of Lake Forest Park being this unique place, doesn't get washed out in the commerce requirements. Am I making sense at all? I guess that's the part that I think we're all a little worried about.
And so we're working on some climate elements in other communities. None of my other communities have to do the greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So I will fully admit that I have not started that particular sub-element process, but the resilience sub-element process is also intended to be very community driven. There's a requirement to form a climate planning advisory team early on, and that team helps develop a list of community assets, both tangible and intangible, helps identify risks and hazards that should be evaluated and should be researched in further detail. There are some very broad data sets that are published. It's a pretty rough scale. And so having the input of that climate planning advisory team really helps hone in on kind of what data needs there are, how to flesh that out so that we have a good picture of that, and then also looking at pairing hazards with assets. So you can talk about flooding risks and drought risks. One of the communities I'm working in is very agricultural based, and so we talk about the agricultural base as being at risk from both drought and flooding. That might not be true in every single community. There are going to be some very community specific risks in Lake Forest Park that are only going to be understood by the people that live here. And so that is baked into the commerce process, at least for the resilience side. So I hope that reassures you a little bit about kind of where things are going to be going in the second, the climate element, the like path to, I think is how I referred to it in the memo.
All right, so I'm going to ask you the question about, is there going to be a seat for somebody on this committee to be on the CAT?
I hope that this committee will be the CPAT, although I am not currently in charge of the climate element. That's Mark's deal.
Let's cover that a little bit. This Thursday night, we're going to introduce the interagency agreement with Commerce for the climate grant at City Council. That's going to take a number of weeks. Ideally, that would already be in place so that we can form that subcommittee. That's task number one. We can do elements of that scope of work, but we need to make that contract and agreement solid and in place. Then we have to RFQ for a consultant to perform the entire scope of work. So that's our priority, and we're going to overlap it a little bit. Any portion of those first steps that we can prepare for, begin or perform, we intend to do in March. Our focus right now, this next week or two, is to get the changes that we need in the interagency agreement in place and then move to our next step. Oh, and here's my answer. Yes.
I'm going to ask you that question again on Thursday night too.
Yeah. Now the key is that stakeholder group, in my opinion, needs to be heavily represented by the Climate Action Committee, but it also needs to consist of elements of different commissions, boards, and council. So I don't think the whole effort will be placed on the Climate Action Committee, but that stakeholder group would consist primarily of Climate Action Committee and other groups. Then when issues, items, discussions come out of that group, an ideal venue would be your regular meetings and your entire group to flesh those out and advise.
Do you have more, Christina, for us?
I do. So at this point,
Well, let's keep it going.
okay.
Let's go to the first one.
At the risk of not keeping it going, are there any other questions about our approach? before I
again,
move on.
I can't see everybody on the screen, so if you have something, just hop in.
Okay, I hear silence, so I am going to move on. All right. So as we're updating the comp plan, we're looking now back at the adaptation of the climate action plan to be represented in all of the different elements in the comp plan. Kind of what and David has seen this slide probably like 8 times now. What we are doing at a high level as we're updating the elements is looking for regulatory compliance with the Growth Management Act and all of its recent amendments, with King County's countywide planning policies where they apply to Lake Forest Park, and also with the Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050. So both King County CPPs and Vision 2050 also include some policy language addressing climate. And so that's something that we are also working on addressing as we are plugging climate in to each of the elements. In addition to regulatory compliance, we also want to be consistent with the community vision and priorities. That includes the vision, as I'm sure you all are very familiar, includes balancing environmental preservation, economic vitality in neighborhoods, supporting diverse cultures and perspectives, and kind of reaffirming Town Center as the vibrant heart of the community. Finally, ensuring that our neighborhoods are safe and well connected. We're using this policy framework. So as we're talking about goals, policies, and strategies or actions, this is kind of what we're looking at. So goals are very high level. They tend to be pretty broad and a little bit vague. They sort of set the direction. Like, hey, we think we want to end up here. The words that we often see are things like encourage, facilitate, promote, and we do keep them intentionally at a fairly high level. Policies start to get more specific. They are some of the steps that make the goals possible, but they are not in and of themselves implementable on their own. They would still need further breakdown in actions, implementation actions that are the discrete steps that move us specifically to achieving those policies and those goals to get to the community vision. So that's kind of the hierarchy that we're looking at and that we're talking about at the Planning Commission for how we're approaching the structure of the document. All right, so we're now on to discussion topics. I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to bring up the memo and we're going to look at the memo together since not everybody has had a chance to review it. So bear with me one moment while I get that pulled up. And I am going to adjust my screen a little bit. Okay. So I included this memo in your materials for tonight. The introduction is kind of the explanation of a lot of the stuff that we just talked about in the slideshow. So it's kind of the background on climate planning requirements, the grant funding, and how we're going to be following this 2-part path. So I'm going to skip that since we've already talked that pretty much to death at this point. As we look at adapting the climate action plan, what we have prepared and what's in this table is we've identified goals, policies, and actions or strategies in the climate action plan. We've referenced where we found those, and then we've noted where we think those should find a home in the comprehensive plan. So which element those should.
Can you make that larger so it's
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is it legible now?
Yes.
So the goal or strategy column, the first column on the left is the policy language that you developed that is in the January 2024 working draft of the climate action plan. What I had hoped to get out of tonight was generally feedback and or consensus on where things were going, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do that. That might be something that we need to that you need to digest this memo a little bit, and that we need to have a follow-up discussion about, or some kind of written feedback, unless everybody really wants to go line by line for 5 pages.
No, we don't want to do that.
Okay.
We'll have to figure out some way to do that, but I don't think that would be productive. Do I speak for the group? Okay.
Yeah, so that sounds good. For the most part, we've tried to just keep it very simple, where we said we think this will appear in one or more elements. This is what those elements are. So for example, reducing emissions, we think will appear in land use, transportation, capital facilities, and utilities, elements of the current comprehensive plan. But we also noted in this case that where this goes will probably depend a little bit on kind of what comes out of some of the greenhouse gas emissions research. So there are some other explanatory notes as we move through. But we've done this for all of the goals and strategies that are listed in the climate action plan. There is.
So TR stands for transportation something,
Yes, this is your, so these are your,
sub-elements.
yeah, the language from the CAP. So TR, BE was built environment and had the natural environment goals section. So that all comes from the CAP. There are a couple carbon sequestration. I'm recommending that we defer that to the climate element process. And there are, I think, just a few of these. Implementing the circular economy, and some of the future preparedness pieces. And the reason that I'm recommending that those be deferred to the climate element are either, for example, in the case of carbon sequestration, there's not really a place where that's already been talked about. Obviously, climate and the natural environment and kind of community building are all really strongly reflected in the comp plan. That's just part of the culture of Lake Forest Park. And so a lot of these have a really, I think, a really clear home in elements where those topics have already been addressed. But for things like carbon sequestration, that hasn't appeared in the comp plan so far. And so I am recommending that we defer that to the climate element. But I'm also open to feedback on that recommendation as well. Same with the circular economy piece. That's something that hasn't really been discussed in the comp plan. So there's not like a very logical home that would that we can see right off the bat. So that's another one that we're recommending deferring to the climate element. These ones I'm recommending deferring to the climate element because those are really kind of the heart and soul of the resilience process that Commerce is recommending, or is that the Commerce is requiring that we follow. And so even if we do work on those now, we're going to have to reopen and rehash those policies when we're doing the climate element anyway. So I'm recommending that we defer these pieces also to the climate element. So that's kind of the summary of what's going on in this table. I would love your feedback on it. You can send it through Mark and he can get it to me. And then there is a little bit of discussion about the specific requirements for the sub-elements for what's happening in the climate element itself. and some notes about what will need to happen. This preliminary policy review is kind of what some of the immediate needs will be for addressing during the climate element planning process, separate of what we're specifically focused on right now. So that's the memo. What questions can I answer kind of about what I'm presenting?
Christine, I just had a question. I guess I'm just kind of surprised that the comprehensive plan doesn't address like trees and carbon sequestration. I mean, I think, right, trees are a big part of Lake Forest Park and it's not addressed in the comp plan.
It does, the comp plan absolutely addresses tree canopy coverage, but it does not address carbon sequestration specifically. And carbon sequestration can be addressed beyond just tree canopy. So we had recommended deferring that topic for further discussion during the climate element process.
Okay.
Would that also cover stuff like the economic value of the tree canopy in Lake Forest Park? Is that one of the reasons to defer?
Not specifically. We certainly can talk about the economic value of tree canopy coverage as we go through this process. That wasn't specifically on my radar as a reason to defer.
Yeah, the reason is that we just got the updated tree inventory. It was presented to the tree board not too long ago, and it was presented to council, and it did really have a very solid number on what the, as it were, forest services are worth to the city.
Okay. So you would be looking at developing that number?
Well, it's already out.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I must have misheard. I thought you said it did not have that, but you said it did have it. Okay.
It did, yeah, sorry. Okay.
I'm sorry. It must have just not come through my headset properly. Yeah, we can. In fact, I would love to see that because we want to include some updated tree canopy information. Mark, can you send that to me tomorrow?
We went through these materials in draft form last night at Planning Commission in preparation for the regular meeting Tuesday night. Those comments have been captured. They haven't been shared with SCJ yet. One of the requests last night was to share the tree report with the Planning Commission. We did that this morning. That'll evolve in a discussion on Tuesday, could very well mirror the comments from this committee. In addition to that, we're going to task the tree board itself this spring to look at a set of materials that we think capture existing tree policy and then make recommendations on where they could be strengthened. And they're very intimately aware with that tree report.
Yeah, I would love to incorporate some of the findings of that updated tree inventory into the comp plan. There are some specific data references that need to be updated, and it sounds like there's some new data that could be added. So that would be really great to have. I
can while we're doing this, I could share that with you. Does the Climate Action Committee have access to all of that, or should I distribute it to all of you too?
Send it to everybody, would you, Mark?
You bet. I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
So when is, I'm trying to figure out sort of, now I'm asking logistical questions. I'm trying to figure out what our role is, and I think a piece of it is to sort of review our document and say, what have you missed? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, let me tab back to my my slides. So what I had hoped to accomplish tonight, and what I would still love to have feedback on, is kind of discussion of these topics. So reviewing our suggestions for where things go in the comp plan and for which things get deferred. And if you think they should go more places or fewer places, or we've suggested the wrong place entirely, I would love to have that feedback. We had 4 instances where we recommended deferral to the climate element, but if there are any other places that you think should be deferred, for broader discussion during the climate element process, then I'm open to that as well. And then also how I was hoping to have a little bit more information about your approach to equity and environmental justice in your process so far, and how well you think that's been addressed in the climate action plan, and just kind of some background on that from the work that you've done so far.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna go
we
back
don't
to-
necessarily, we might not be able to get to any or all of these tonight, but certainly not all of them. We might not be able to get to any of them tonight. But this is the feedback that I was hoping to get.
So let me start with the third one, because that's easy. I mean, it's easy to answer. We don't have any thoughts on the environmental justice at this point. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. We're very concerned about it, but we didn't feel that we had the capacity. We have asked a consultant to review that for us, and we'll have that by the end of the month.
Okay.
That's the easy part. The other is, it's harder to figure. Let me ask this question, is when is the, maybe you know, when is the planning commission going to look at the issues of the integration of these elements into the company?
So the planning commission is getting their, well, I guess last night they had their first look. They got some very similar questions that compared to what's presented here. But they're not as intimately involved in the process as you all have been, right? So it's a different perspective. We're going to be talking about it again at their regular meeting next Tuesday. And it's an ongoing conversation since we're incorporating climate into each element. So this will kind of broadly happen next week as kind of an introductory piece, but then will be a recurring part of our conversation through June.
More than that, right? More than that on your agenda.
Yeah, we have transportation.
So I was thinking maybe a way to sort of address this would be if the planning commission would invite us to come so we could sit around the table with them during that piece of the discussion about climate, and then we could bring our concerns about whether we would have a week to look at this, and then we'd have a way of but I know the planning commission has more to do than just this on their agenda, so we would just be there for the discussion of climate, and then we'd go someplace else.
But how about this as a suggestion? The download with me and SCJ will occur. The planning commission on Tuesday night will go through transportation and the materials on climate. We're looking at climate as more of a 2-month touch in comparison to some of the other elements, but they really need to get through transportation in March as much as we can, because the housing element, it follows that, which is also a very huge lift. But if we look at this climate discussion in general as a 2-month topic, and then discuss with the commission about that interaction or a workshop or a shared meeting opportunity to address the identical materials, that may work better than assume doing that on Tuesday night.
Do we have access to the comp plan?
Yes, it's on the website.
Absolutely, yeah. All the materials for the drafts will be on the website too.
Can you send a link when you send? You're going to send some other stuff to the committee. Could you also just send a link so people can find it? The website sometimes it's hard to.
Yeah, I'll do that. And I only have some emails, so I'm going to send it off. If you can then share it. I don't believe there's a shared climate action committee email. If there is, that you can forward that.
There should be, but you can just send this stuff to me and then I'll send it out to the rest.
Will do.
Does that work for you, Christina? So what I'm hearing this, let me see if I understand this. Well, I don't understand it. So I can't tell you what I understand, but not at the next Tuesday meeting, but at some future joint meeting, we would look at these together. Is that?
Well, we would talk about this at the commission at our next meeting to propose the idea.
Yeah. Well, does that work for the climate committee? That's the other, climate action committee?
I could not hear the comment because the gentleman who spoke is sitting off camera and pointed his voice away from the
Okay.
microphone that we hear.
He's from the planning commission and he said that our idea about kidnapping the planning commission's agenda was probably not inappropriate and but that they talked to him about it. Is that right?
That was propose the idea, as Mark is saying.
Yeah. And then at some point, is that, or I don't know, I'm sort of over jello here in terms of best way to proceed.
Yeah,
Is
I mean,
the-
I'm happy to take written feedback. If people want to send their individual thoughts on to Mark, he can pass them on to me and I can kind of assemble everything into a revised table for presentation. That could be one way to save a little bit of time potentially. It's a little clunky for sure, but definitely possible. Other than that, following Mark's suggestion, I think will work fine as well.
We get a date for when you want our input.
If we're looking at a joint meeting, then the next one would be in April, which I believe would be April 9th. We, because of Planning Commission special meetings, we would aim to have final materials for Planning Commission by the 29th of March. So ideally, sometime later this month. But also, I think that your guys' next meeting is the first week of April. So I don't know if that would work from a timing perspective.
Okay, I think that what I think I'm hearing, and help me if this isn't right, is that we'll approach this in two ways. If you have written comments, you can send them to Christina. I think the downside of that is that there's a certain richness that happens when we have a conversation about it, and that we're moving into a, so I'm a little, but I think people, as they're going through, might have an idea and they'll just throw it at you, but we need to have a conversation. And that conversation would take place at a planning commission meeting, a joint planning commission meeting, maybe if they invite us. But that I would say that members of the Climate Action Committee, that's in my family, we have command performance events. This would not be a command performance, but everybody would be invited. So if your schedule didn't work, or we just say, okay, or you didn't want to. Because we don't have to have quorum, do we, to have a conversation? Anyway, that's what I'm thinking.
Does the structure of the comp plan change in this revision, this 10-year revision?
No.
So the structure is set by law or whatever. So the elements that we would be suggesting that cap plan aspects fit into are the same things that are in the 2015 comp plan. So
Yes.
in order to see where we would put this kind of thing, even though we don't know what the comp plan is going to be, it's kind of grossly fitting into. You just want to know which element we would put it into, not any finer than that.
Correct. Yes. We're looking generally for like topical alignment on where you think things should go within the comp plan, but I will say there aren't dramatic sweeping changes that are happening. We are planning consistent with the current the community vision from the 2015 comp plan, which was validated at the Planning Commission. There are some big changes related to housing that are driven by legislative changes. But we're not looking at dramatically different development patterns or transportation patterns. I mean, those things are Lake Forest Park is a substantially built out community. So there just aren't as many interventions to make in some regards. So a lot of our work is updating and refreshing information that's already in there. There's a pretty big focus on language updates to respond to all of the equity directives from the legislature, from King County, and from Puget Sound Regional Council. But the structure is pretty similar, and a lot of the goals and policies are also pretty similar. You'll see them carried through into the 2024 plan as well. They might be refreshed a little bit.
So I want to speak to the value of having people in a room having a conversation. I think the most horrific thing anyone trying to pull together a single document can get is written comments from one group that say it's important that you do this using method A, while the other group sends over, no, method B is the most important. And you get two groups who need to sort out their own priorities before they can ask you to write up what the priority is. And I really think, I mean, this getting written comments from all of this group without us even meeting with or talking to planning commissioner or coming together as a large group just sounds counterproductive. I mean, it's a good exercise for us as individual members to put our thoughts on paper, but I don't see how that adds to the forward progress until we actually do have a conversation, again, looking at your plans and looking at what the planning commission's pulling together, and also going back and I want to read your memo very carefully, and understand how you're trying to parse out the bits and pieces. I'd like to set up that group meeting.
You mean with our own climate action committee, just for us to talk amongst ourselves and sort things out ourselves?
Yes, but I also see April as being a good month for us to be able to talk among ourselves, but then also follow up and meet with the planning commission and have the broader conversation. Is there some reason that isn't done? I mean, is there any reason to not meet collectively to discuss this topic?
Are you suggesting at our next meeting, Anne, our April meeting?
Or at their April meeting?
Or their, so what?
They're pretty busy.
Yeah.
Their schedule is pretty tight, so we have to. Can't just say,
I think we should meet among ourselves, so we're efficiently taking their
I
time.
think we need to educate ourselves as to.
Okay,
David, when is the planning commission planning on tackling the climate element? It's its own thing.
So we've begun a discussion, so this, how Christina has.
can you guys hear?
No, it's really helpful if you point your voice towards the microphone that transmits to us. Thank you so much for joining the table.
You're welcome. So as Christina has presented today, we were introduced to some of the same process at our meeting last evening at the Planning Commission. So at our next meeting, Christina will be with us again, and we will discuss we'll be discussing transportation, right, which is at the top of our agenda, and then we will also discuss the suggestions that Christina has made in regards to how some of these elements that you have all developed fit into the comp plan. And so what I'm hearing is that you would all, like to meet with us as a joint meeting, right? But it sounds like what Christina's asking is that you look at the information that she's presented, right? And determine how does that fit? What do you think about that? Right? And then you'll have an idea, and then we will have an idea about how we're thinking about it. And if that comes together, then I think that generates a conversation that would be productive.
So I do think that climate is on the agenda for April, not the climate element, but this part of the process, talking about adapting the climate action plan. The climate element will hit planning commission, I think late summer, probably. If I had to guess, knowing that, we still have this consultant selection process and kickoff and like early planning stages for the climate element. That said, discussing climate at the April meeting, I think is doable. The other topic at the April meeting, however, is housing, which is going to be a very big discussion as well. This will be the last of, I think this will be the fourth discussion about housing and the last discussion about housing that we're planning at this point. And it has historically taken the entirety of the meeting. So I would just say that, yes, we are planning to talk climate, but I do also think that the April meeting will be constrained because of the other topic on the agenda that night.
So it sounds like attending so that we can listen and learn where our planning commission already is would be fully appropriate still. Attending as guests, sitting and listening.
And
Well,
I do.
It's also a public meeting, and I know you've been to
Mhm.
one. I've only had 3 or 4 planning commissions, and you were at one. Sarah's been to all the ones that I've been to. Individuals from that committee, members of the public, you could attend any meeting of the planning commission. If you want to discuss consensus and commission to commission discussion, you need to notice it. If you're going to have a quorum, that would be a joint meeting, and we need time as a commission based on our workload to incorporate that in. I don't think anyone's saying let's not do it, but we have a lot of factors that are already being juggled. So how we do it and when needs to be discussed next week.
Right, because I just heard Christina say, you're welcome to come to our meeting, but we're not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about housing, which is a big fulsome issue. So
I'm not saying that we're not talking about climate. I am saying that the agenda is very full in April and it won't be only climate.
And housing is a very key part. If you've been in touch with the legislature the last 2 years, housing is the main topic in this periodic update. It is not easy. It needs to be addressed. And by June, because that grant funding would be jeopardized as far as reimbursement, housing has to go forward.
we're not saying that. It's just saying, I'm just trying to figure out when the best time is, given.
Yeah, and so we'll have that discussion on Tuesday. We'll try and incorporate it in. My suggestion is not going to be add any more special meetings to Planning Commission. They are overloaded. There's 2 a month between now and June, and they're heavily tasked. So we'll have that discussion with the commission, see how we can achieve it, because I think it's important, but it doesn't need to displace anything that they're currently working on. We could add to it within their workload.
We need to focus on the climate action committee getting together to discuss this memo to get Christina the review back. And
Right.
then we can go from there of when we can get
Sure.
you guys.
We don't know where
A lot we can do on our own.
Yeah, I definitely prefer that approach of having us provide a collective response instead of piecemeal person by person.
Well, why don't we say that our April agenda is to look at this and then get that information to Christina. And, we'll, if we can, and then we'll figure out what the next step is in terms of a joint meeting or some people are just sitting in the audience. Does that make sense?
Does that meet your timeline though? If
Yeah.
we don't get it before our April meeting?
It
Our,
does.
our April
They
meeting
wanted
is-
it by the end of March. Right?
Yeah.
We're looking at the elements that this would contain, we're looking at all the way to June until we get a recommendation. So we need to start moving towards that, right? And so as you're working on the climate action plan, we can meet with your group. I can come to your meetings. Christina can. There's an issue about which funding we would use for her participation, but we can do that work. The planning commission schedule is very busy between now and June, and so we'll work it in. Maybe if the structure is to prioritize it and have staff come to your meetings and then relay that information through Corey, my nights are committed for 2 years. So if that works for you, it puts less burden on a joint workshop, but we will still try and achieve a joint workshop.
I think you guys are okay with getting their feedback after April 2nd.
Yeah, so the planning commission special meeting in April is the 4th. And if we could have and understand your suggestions and feedback like on the no later than the 3rd. I don't know how you guys will talk about it on the 2nd. I don't know if there will be any need to like pull anything together afterwards.
Okay.
But if we could get that on the 3rd, then we'll be prepared to talk about it at the special meeting on the 4th.
And then,
I think
and then
Go ahead.
have a necessary from the committee come to the April 4th meeting.
I think as long as we don't have a quorum, but if everything goes well next week, maybe Corey and I work on a public notice and achieve that on the 4th. It might be possible.
Well, I don't know. I think that works. So
Yeah.
let's try it and see what happens.
Yep.
But I just want to say to my colleagues here that we will also have the final document in front of us theoretically of our climate action plan. But it will be the final document, but we do need to.
When do we get that?
We have to read-
April.
Yeah.
We should get
For
it
our meeting?
March 29th. It's supposed to be done.
And I'm not a loss there being new. I don't know what your schedule is over between now with Cascadia and formatting and when it would go to council and when we would expect it to be, if I'm using the wrong term, forgive me, adopted or accepted. Do you have a general timeline?
It'd be April or May for council to adopt. We'll be getting the plan back from Cascadia by the end of March, so.
Okay, if that's the case, then we can achieve this in the time frame Planning Commission already understands for climate, March and April. Those would exist as drafts. We would have achieved our survey. We're going to hold a public hearing at Planning Commission and before the strikeout underlines get conveyed. So I think we can fine tune if in March and April we get that initial feedback from your committee.
Okay. I guess. I just do want to say, we do have a lot of things. I mean, we do have other things going on.
I'd work all night if I could.
Four people are meeting 3 times in the next month with Cascadia.
Yeah. And it's all at the same time, so it's a heavy lift, but Planning Commission's doing admirable work. Staff's committed. There's a lot going on. And so I don't want to demean that by saying we're busy, but we are incredibly busy. So we'll try and achieve all of that at the same time. I look at it as an opportunity. Otherwise, it would be linear and we'd be having this discussion in 2028.
Okay, you got more, Christina, or?
I do not. That concluded my presentation.
Okay, are there, I have a couple of things, but are there any comments you want to make on what we've heard from Christina? So what I'm summarizing is this, that for the moving this particular piece forward, we're going to look at the memo that Christina has, where she's looked through our document and identified places. We're going to get together in our April meeting and say what as we look through our document, where are places, are there additional items that we want to include, or are there places we want to defer. So we'll have that conversation. And then we'll get that information somehow to you guys.
That is exactly right. Yes, that's what I took away from this discussion as well.
Okay, terrific.
I also just wanted to thank you for working with us because I can't imagine it's easy to try to integrate the work of 2 different committees, both of whom had their own agendas to start off with. So thank you and Mark for basically working with both of us.
Indeed.
I'm really happy.
We'll work through Corey because I cannot inherit another group. Between Tree Board, Planning Commission, City Council, I'm more than happy to come to this group, but staff will work together to facilitate as best possible, but I don't want to inherit the CAC too.
No, we like Corey, so we don't.
Corey well, there's state.
Sarah,
Yes.
One thing that I did want to point out is that you, I think you also should have received my slide deck, and that does include the discussion questions at the end. So you should have those as well if you didn't write them down for some reason.
Do we have that? We do have, yeah. Do we have them in?
Yeah,
Okay,
they're separate documents.
Okay, I printed out something that was a little
They're in
bit,
that
so,
same.
okay, same packet.
So
Terrific.
I guess my only question for Christina is, when you looked at our climate action plan, were there elements in that that never show up in the commerce requirements?
It's tough to say because the commerce requirements, they have like the process requirements, and they have kind of like these big picture goals, but it really is intended to be a community driven process that is tailored to the specifics of your place. I would say some of the things are definitely not really addressed in the commerce guidance, like um, the circular economy. That was new compared to the reading that I've done in commerce um, commerce guidance. I think that's really one of the notable ones. Some of their very specific implementation actions that you list are maybe go a little bit further than what commerce is recommending. Even they have this huge menu of um, they call it the menu of measures, and it's like policy suggestions. But because yours is a more implementation focused plan, it is just a lot more specific and detailed. That's another really big difference compared to what commerce has presented. Um, there are the commerce's guidance has some requirements that aren't really reflected in the climate action plan.
But that's to be expected.
Right. I mean, they
I'm-
developed
I'm-
it like long after you started, which
Well-
so that makes sense.
And they're looking at, we definitely shrank a lot to what do we have in Lake Forest Park. So I assume that commerce is going to have elements that actually don't apply at all. And they're going to have elements that can go beyond what we were envisioning. And this is all wonderful. The reason I'm asking is because you were asking about, things that would be deferred to that part of the program. And I think long and the short of it, from my perspective, is kind of the whole thing ends up being deferred into your part of the program. However, we work in parallel. We still can start implementing, we can still start trying to get revisions to our own planning processes, our own codes, do as much implementation as we can, as quickly as we can, understanding that most of what we've got here actually has to show up in your document. Not all of it. Yeah, some of it's going to be more detailed. Some of it's going to be how do we actually implement it here in Lake Forest Park. But unless we have screwed up entirely, there should be a lot of overlap.
Yes, I believe that will be the case. And so the way that the climate law is written is that, yes, you have to have the standalone climate element, but you also have to integrate climate policies into several other elements. Transportation, land use, capital facilities, and utilities are the minimum requirements. The way that the climate action plan is written seems like there's going to be a good fit in most or all of the other elements of the comp plan. So I think it will just appear everywhere, which is, I mean, that's above and beyond the minimum requirements, but also that's really consistent with my understanding of the Lake Forest Park community and your approach to climate planning and to the environment. So, that's something that I was expecting. I don't think that there are any big inconsistencies between what you've prepared and what the Department of Commerce is requiring in terms of like your actual content. I think that there are some pieces missing, like the specific evaluation of the hazards that Commerce has identified and following their methodology for assessing risk to that. And then there's a lot of specificity about the greenhouse gas emissions reduction planning process that I don't fully understand yet because we haven't really done it anywhere. But I do think that pretty much everything that's in the CAP will wind up in the climate element also. or might end up there in more of like a general goal policy setting context with the understanding that the CAP is the implementation plan for what that looks like.
So, in terms of your final question, what do I expect to see deferred? I don't, I understand that some of the things that we would like to discuss probably cannot be discussed until we do some of the actual studies involved in the Commerce Plan. No problem with that. But also the Commerce Plan is going to have to necessarily revisit a lot of what we've done, and that's fine. I mean, in a perfect world, climate action plans would be reviewed and updated constantly. And this is about as close as it's going to come to constant process for the next 18 months.
Everyone is going to be so sick of the climate by the time we're done.
Hey, we're still going to have to deal with the heat dome issues, the incredible cold issues, the smoke issues, the water management, too much, too little.
Hey, are there other questions? Because there's a little bit more. I don't want to. I just want to report. We've got two things coming up that we need some subcommittees to work on. One is the Green Fair, which is in
Should
March.
we let these guys go?
Oh, yeah, you guys want to go? Goodbye.
They don't have.
Oh,
Stay if you want to. This is nothing for you. This is business.
okay.
So
Well,
much coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have a great night. Thank you. And I
Thank
will
you.
look
Thank
forward
you.
to hearing from you soon.
Corey, when is the Green Fair? March 3rd. 30th. March 30th is the Green Fair. And what we've talked about in the Green Fair just casually is that it's, what are the easiest things you're doing to help move things along? Like, what are you using instead of saran wrap? Are you using a loamy, turning your house waste into dirt? What are the other kinds of things? We just have them out on, we're looking for as easy as possible. Have them out on the table and then have some boards, display things that are intended to generate conversation. So I need a couple of people to think about that. And I also need you to think of taking an hour or two on March 30th. Is there anybody who would like to join the Green Fair Committee?
So Sarah, I'm happy to be part of it, but I'm also I got the two hats that day. I've got the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation that's going to be there. Happy to be mobile in between the two tables if that is at all helpful.
But this isn't the sign up for that, right?
No,
This is
this is
really to plan.
Figuring it out.
Right.
Well, it's both, right?
Both.
I think
Well,
one
yeah,
is both.
figure people out.
Okay.
Okay, how about Linda and Dana?
So I'm going to New Zealand next week and I won't be back until after the Green Fair,
Oh,
after
well.
our meeting.
Okay,
So I'm kind of out of it.
okay, anybody can join Linda and I?
I will.
Okay, Tracy. And then we're gonna send out I'll send out a just form for you to sign up and hope you will. The other is,
Quick recommendation about that, if you give free things away.
we are giving free, oh, we are giving free things away. We're giving
Or laundry.
those dry laundry sheets. And I wrote them and asked them if they had microplastics in them and they denied it.
Okay. I have to find that article.
Um,
Did they offer you free sample?
No, we're paying for them. The other is that we're having a climate town hall. And this is the first district, the first legislative district. All of them have said they would come. They're going to talk about what happened on the issues of climate in the legislature and what do they anticipate. Brian said he'd be the moderator. Is that still on, Brian? Because if it's too, okay, Brian will be the moderator.
What's the date?
April 13. It's a Saturday morning from 10 to noon. And I think that's going to be easy, except we will need people there to help just sort of manage. And I think what we'll do is, and I just wanted to say that Kenmore is co-sponsoring it with us. I have a conversation with both Woodinville and Bothell to sort of join that so that it is sort of modeling that program that we've talked about, what people should be doing, the city should be doing in collaboration. And the other is, I just want to say what Kenmore's doing, because it turns out if you have staff, you can do a lot of stuff. they're doing Solarize Kenmore, where they're getting people together, contractors and finance and to help people actually put solar up there. It has to do with, the contractors will give a specific cost that it's guaranteed from now until July 4th. So, and they're trying to implement solar in a variety of places. They get a group rate, they get a discount, and it's a pretty sweet thing.
Can we join in on that?
No, because it's PCE, Puget Sound Energy, that's the problem.
So,
Sorry, folks, I gotta go. My computer's about to die and I
Okay.
had a ridiculously long day. I gotta go. Sorry.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
yeah, just if you want to see the workshop, even though we can't participate, they are having one at Kenmore City Hall on Thursday, March 21st at 6:30.
They're also doing EV strategic planning and where to put the chargers, and they're doing some installation focusing on multifamily. And they're also setting up an advisory committee, and they'd like sometime to have a joint meeting with us, just to chat, maybe down the road. Not in April. But Climate Advisory Group.
Don't they have one of those already?
No, apparently not.
Is
So
Kenmore?
there's Kenmore.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm trying to-
So the sort of all interesting stuff there. The other is the coordination with Cascadia. I don't know where we are in the meetings. Do you, Corey?
What do you mean?
When are they?
They'll be starting March 12th at 11.
Okay, March 12th at 11. What?
11:30.
11:30. So that, a note, did you already send a note out? I missed it. Great, thank you. And so what we're gonna be meeting with Cascadia on their issues, and we'll report back, I guess, at the April meeting. So, and we think that we'll have a report. Anything else for the good of the order?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, I had a meeting yesterday with a group called Sustainability Markers. And it's what it sounds like. Craig Reynolds at Mercer Island introduced me to them, and so I attended a webinar with them. They actually are trying to quantify cities' impacts, not just in terms of greenhouse gases, but water, electricity, all these kinds of parameters. And their refreshing approach is that they're only getting publicly available data that's actually very specific. So none of this air travel is per capita this much, that kind of stuff, right? So I think it's kind of a interesting approach. And if you go to sustainabilitymarkers.org, that's their website, you can see the dashboards they're trying to develop for each city. And one of the most startling ones, which I'm going to present at council on Thursday, is literally this one that shows, for instance, number of swipes of the Orchid card in Mercer Island from 2015 to now at an annual basis. And it just drops off the cliff in 2020, as you might expect, and never recovers. Yeah. So they have some remarkable data. So it might be something to check out. They knew I was attending, so they made some Lake Forest Park specific ones that are available on that site now. So
What's the name again?
it's sustainabilitymarkers.org.
Who's doing that?
It's two fellows who work at Microsoft, who just basically we're trying to help Mercer Island trying to figure out its climate action plan, because unlike our plan, they have percentages in their plan. And so they were holding Mercer Island feet to the fire, right? Are you actually doing this, right? And so the point is basically that this is an outcome of that.
Does Mercer Island have a climate element in their comp plan?
They will have to, just like everybody else.
But they don't have it yet.
I didn't ask specifically.
Not many do it, so I don't.
Tracy, I'm disappointed. They only have Mercer Island, Bellevue, and Redmond right now.
Yes.
I don't,
They
Yeah.
didn't post the Lake Forest Park.
Well, I'll ask them for it. I'll share it with the committee. Yeah,
That'd be very cool. Thank you.
sure.
okay, anything else that we need? I just want to thank you all. I know there's been a lot of stuff last week and this week, and I really appreciate it. I think that's going to be, I feel like we're sort of, I tell this story, I'm a boater. I get out on the boat, I'm in a very slow boat, and there are islands in front of you, and you think, whoa, which side of the island do I go on? And pretty soon, you know, you get there and it's all will be revealed, because there's only one side you can go on. And I feel like I'm standing way back and saying, which way should we go around this? But I believe all will be revealed in this process. So, hooray for us. But
But
thank you again.
Better an island than a tidal wave in the boat.
Yes.
That's what I would.
Yes.
Yeah, good point.
All right. Does anybody object to the meeting being adjourned?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.